Hello and welcome back to another episode of the EP Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McCarthy, the director at Hunter Rehab and Health. And I'm joined by a very special guest with me today, Nicole French, the founder and chief vision officer. Absolutely love that, by the way, at Exercise for Rehabilitation and Health. How are you going, Nicole?
I'm very well, Ryan. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Very, very excited to have you on the podcast today. I think you'll provide a wealth of knowledge for the listeners out there.
Oh, thank you. Look, I really hope to. And thank you in advance for having me on. I'm a very big fan of this show and I love listening to all of your episodes. So it's a real delight to be here with you today.
Yeah, awesome. I just want to jump on that one real quick. Chief Vision Officer. Yeah, it's a different one. I saw that title on your LinkedIn. So where'd that one come about?
Well, I am the founder of the organization, but I think as our structures have changed over time, and I've really started to understand my role in the organization, it's really about the visionary side of things and moving dreams into goals and into plans. And I think really protecting that vision and letting those the vision and mission and values really dictate to where we're going and what we're doing. It needs a representative, and I am that representative, which is lovely, and I'm really comfortable. I transitioned into this role about 12 months ago and really working in my genius. So it's all about the vision.
Love it. Love it. That makes perfect sense now. Awesome. Well, let's get started. Let's tell us a little bit about your background and how, you came to become an EP.
Great. Well, I have a couple of university qualifications. So I have a Bachelor of Applied Science in human movement. There we go. And a master's in exercise rehab. So both of those degrees date back almost 20 years ago now, but I found a real love in postgrad for exercise prescription for specific populations. And, when I first started as an accredited exercise physiologist, I worked in hospitals, which was really great grounding for me for about 2 to 3 years, where I really got to understand and appreciate the multidisciplinary effect and approach, how positive that can actually be for patients. And I looked to move that model into a private practice model. So really bringing the best of hospital multidisciplinary care into a private sector to really create some impact in that space.
Wow. Excellent. So tell us about that new grad year. Your new grad first year out of university, you're in a hospital. What exactly were you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, there were two of us in the hospital. So it was majority physio. So there were probably about 20 or so physios, and there were two of us EPs, and I was the first graduate that they'd ever had in, which was really great. My main role was to look at exercise groups. So I didn't really do a lot of the assessment. So the way that it generally worked is I was in outpatients and I worked with amputee patients. I worked with, physical conditioning, falls and balance, some neurological conditions as well. And what would generally happen is that somebody would present to the outpatient division after being discharged from inpatients, and the physio would do the initial assessment and see where the physical conditioning side of things really needed to come into play. And while the physio sort of did their thing, we would put that collaborative care model in place, and the EP or I would really do a lot more of that physical conditioning, a little bit of gait retraining and some falls and balance, but it was very group orientated. So rather than the EP doing specific assessments and really working through properly prescribed, I would say an individualized exercise program, which is what I really wanted to do, which was a part of the shift into private practice. It was very much group. And I actually started as an allied health assistant before I transitioned into an EP role as well. But, that transition, it wasn't easy. And I wouldn't say I was given a whole lot of support as well. I remember turning up to my first day in my new role, and I was given my schedule. I was told where to sit and to go. And, and that was it. There wasn't specific mentoring. Professional development was sort of added in ad hoc in what might be helpful to sit in with the physios. But there was nothing particularly structured, and there wasn't a personal or professional development program, for me. And that's something that I really wanted to change in moving into private practice. And we can certainly talk about our Graduate Plus program, later on if we get time. But that's something that I really wanted to reflect on it and change in my private practice to make sure that graduates were actually really well supported with comprehensive, onboarding and induction and, personal and professional development. It's something that I never got. In retrospect, that's okay, because what did it do? It empowered the resilience in me to learn myself, and to be really in charge of my own development. So not a bad thing.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons of that situation. I think, yeah, there's a saying of that, yeah, we want to be the leader that we wish we had. So I think, yeah, you want to be the mentor that you wish you had. So I think that's obviously motivated you to create something amazing. So definitely pros and cons of that. So tell us about that transition. Then, what was the catalyst to go? Okay, done with hospital, time for private practice.
Look, I was growing a little unsettled in my role, but the real sense of urgency came when I had a workplace accident, to be completely honest, and I wasn't able to return to my pre-injury role, and I was transitioned into a triage role within the hospital. And that was great because there were some really great learnings in that. But when I was really physically ready to go back to my role, unfortunately, they no longer had a position for me. They had replaced me. And I wasn't able to work full-time hours still with my capacity. So I was walked into the allied health manager's office one day and basically told not to come back the next. So that was my catalyst. I remember walking back to my car, sitting there. I gave myself a couple of minutes to compose myself and then asked myself a very simple question: where to from here? And I had one of two roads to go down. I could either sit there and become a victim to somebody else's decision and, a whole set of circumstances that were out of my control, or I could focus on why I decided to be an EP to begin with and harness that strength and use all of those life experiences that I had been through, as a patient going through rehab, and go, you know what? I've got a lot to give. I've got a lot to offer. I'm going to do it myself. And so within about a week of being let go from that position, I had a room. I went down and spoke to a local physio practice, and I said, this is what I'm about and this is what I want to do. I really think we could work well together. What do you think? And she said, yes, let's do it. So I was set up within a couple of weeks. I had my ABN all created. I had my homemade business card. So, we needed to do something about that back on the older clip art. But, I had $110. That's how I started my organization. I had $110. What that afforded me was my first session of rent, which was 4 hours in the traction room of a physio practice, a Swiss ball, which I purchased from a trade display because they gave it to me for a cheaper price. I was pretty excited. And a piece of TheraBand. So one woman, $110, and a pretty powerful vision for how I wanted my EP business to run.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing, Nicole. That's very inspiring, I think, to a lot of other individuals that might have been in that same situation. Very motivational, and exactly right. You can take two approaches to any situation, and that's an extremely inspirational story there that'll hopefully motivate some of the listeners out there. So, is that was the business you started? Is the business you've got now? Is that the same name, same ABN?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's my baby business. That's what I call
wow.
my baby business. So that was 17 years ago. So look, along that journey, we have to remember I started with nothing. So I didn't have any patients. I didn't have any referrers. So I had to get myself pretty known in the local community. So that's when I went on to practice visits, and it's quite funny because I started to dig deep, and I was never a networker. I was very shy. But I had to develop this inner confidence to go out and start speaking to people. So within our first year, I had gone out and visited every single GP and medical practice in the entire Northwest Division of Melbourne, and started to build a load. And things were moving pretty well. I was on my own for a little while, and then I started to open up satellite clinics. So I started to look at leisure centres, and as more and more people became a fan of the service, more and more people asked me to move in with them and do a session here and a session there. And that was great. I was doing some postgraduate lecturing at night time as well. And that was funding a lot of the cost of the business, because wasn't seeing a whole lot of patients at the start. But what that afforded me the opportunity to do as well was stay connected to my students once they had graduated. So as my satellite clinics grew under that brand, I started to recruit my former postgraduate students and develop this whole little tribe of us. And we had about 9 locations before we knew it in our first 3 years. But I felt like there was something missing. I really wanted to support our clients or our patients throughout their whole lifespan. I wanted to look at prevention, which we were able to do. And I still think we're really great at our prevention-based work and our longer-term management. But I wanted to look to support people in their acute phases of injury as well. And I started working with a physio. And when I say working, we were cross-referring. Yep. And we started to understand the real power of the collaborative effect of physio and EP. And we did that for a few years. And by year 5, we decided that this collaborative effect was so great. What we should actually do is start something together. So we made a very brave decision. I looked to close down all of my satellite clinics because there was a lot of running around and it wasn't achieving what I really wanted to achieve. I really wanted to work with the collaborative model. And so what I decided to do was open a physiotherapy practice. So I closed down my 9 satellite sites. I bought a building. I fitted out the building with some rooms and a gym space and a reception counter and all that sort of stuff. And I actually developed a second brand. So we had Exercise for Rehabilitation and Health, which are accredited exercise physiologists. And then I started Essendon Physio Group, which was all about sort of more your acute management and care and sporting injuries and all of those types of things. So I created 2 brands, but under one roof, so that what we could look to do was have our collaborative care model with 2 brands. Because the reality is I had no idea, bring this to market, how it was going to be received. So we decided we'll do the 2 brands. So I founded both brands and I brought the physio on board. And that physio just happens to be my husband as well. So we're quite the power couple. We have a joke about that, the EP and the physio collab.
Yeah, it's quite handy.
Yeah, it is. He left his job and he came and helped me develop that brand. And over the course of now 10 years, so Essendon Physio Group's been in play for 10, we've continued to develop both brands, but under one roof. But both brands really focus on some different aspects of care. So we've got Essendon Physio Group, which is really more physiotherapy specialist services. So things like vestibular assessment and rehabilitation and TMJ and jaw pain and dysfunction alongside your full range of musculoskeletal type of injuries. And then you've got Exercise for Rehabilitation and Health, which does your musculoskeletal injuries. So we've got the beautiful collaborative care, but we also do your chronic disease management as well. And we've trained our team members over time to look to support the vestibular care of those vestibular and dizzy cases that come through Essendon Physio Group. So what we have developed over time is 1 location, 2 brands, and a beautiful multidisciplinary team.
That sounds absolutely amazing, Nicole. I think, that's so good to explain it in that sense. It's much more easier to digest than when there's 2 different brands there. So obviously when you're getting referrals there's no choice of where they go to. They're being referred to one or the other. Is that correct? Like it's not, yeah, they're either referred with that business name on it. So there's no decision-making process there. Is that correct?
Look, they can be. And what we have developed over time in response to a very question like that is a complete and comprehensive triaging team in here. So what we look to do at the core of what we do is we ask ourselves what is going to be best placed for that patient or that client coming into our service. And so every time a referral comes in, it generally has, whether it's physiotherapy or exercise physiology, and it does that because we work really hard with our referrers as well. And our referrers are really well educated and informed around when to refer to who and what would be the most ideal service. But we do have a step that when a referral actually enters the practice, that our central triage team actually work through almost like a checklist system for each referral. Because we may have a provider, for instance, whose name or whose profession is not on the referral, but may be better placed to see that patient.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Very, very important, I guess, having that triage system in place there for them. What about in terms of systems or procedures in place within the business for that referral, either way, from EP to physio, physio to EP? Is it something that it's obviously encouraged, but is it measured? Is it like, what sort of systems do you have in place around the referral and supporting of each other, each of the practices there?
Love it. The first thing I think to say about that is with our practice, we have an even playing field and mutual respect with all of our practitioners. And I think one thing that we do a little bit differently to set us up for success in that space is the recruitment of the right people into the organization. So people that are a fan of shared care, and that are really willing to learn off the whole team and work with the whole team. Our training is very comprehensive. So we also have a 4-year training program. So it's quite comprehensive, but it's very well structured. With my postgraduate lecturing background, I'm very step by step with our teaching. And what we look to do is we actually have standardized treatment approaches for particular conditions within the practice. So there's an expectation if somebody comes in for a particular condition that there's an entry point. There's a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then there's criteria for self-management or discharge, for instance. Now, when we take our clinicians through that training, one of the things that we keep asking and we keep honing in on is always be asking yourself who is best placed to see this patient. So with our good onboarding systems, our great recruitment systems, and with our training systems, it's an ingrained culture that we look at who's best placed to see the patient. But one of the other things that we do, which I think really keeps us on track, and then I can talk about measuring that as well, is we case conference. So we actually have structured sessions set out in the week for multidisciplinary and same discipline case conferencing as well. And there's a whole lot of mentoring that goes on too. So every time somebody comes in, and let's say you're in your first year of training with us, you've assessed the patient, you've set out the treatment plan for them, they've got their written treatment plan, you're actually going to debrief with a senior clinician over that. And they're going to really tease out everything in that to make sure that everything's in place so that that person that has chosen to come to our practice actually gets the best outcome and the best experience. And that often comes down to shared care arrangements. There are distinct points in time where patients are transitioned from one discipline to another. But what we tend to do is we tend to not hand over the whole client, so we don't move from EP all the way over to physio or vice versa. There's a transition step in there. So they do, if they start with one, they'll continue with one, they'll transition to do a little bit of both, and then they might be completely handed over, or they might remain shared care. But the really pivotal part of that is having a respectful conversation in case conferencing time to say, I've got this client, this is how they've presented. These are our goals and these are our first steps. What are people's thoughts on
Mm.
that? Does anyone else have anything to add? And it's beautiful. It's such, and I get like all flushery about it because it's just, if you look at the ideal practice, it's person centered, and it's what research tells us to do, and it's what we all know we should be doing, but it is so rare in practice
Mm.
that it is actually done. So this whole idea of shared care, open and transparent communication around assessment findings, and having a culture where you knock on someone's door and say, hey, I've got this patient, this is where they're at. Do you think value add to this? Can I just tease a few things out with you? And it's beautiful. I love walking around the practice, seeing these doors open and someone sitting on the end of a treatment bed, having these conversations. I walked in on it just before when I came in, where there was a physio handover to EP for an FND case. And it is absolutely magic. And, we all know we should be doing it. And that's always been my dream, to take that multidisciplinary approach that has been historically done well in a hospital setting, and bring it into private practice with safety nets in place,
Mhm.
and with coaching and support, and this beautiful culture of these lovely values that people genuinely share, and where they genuinely put the patient or the client at that center of the care.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely gold, Nicole. I think because what we're passionate about is growing the EP profession. And we know that I think, yes, the second fastest growing job title in Australia. And what is
Mm,
happening is a lot of EPs are coming into physio practices and it's not working out well. And I think that's a credit to you and the culture that you've created, because you've sort of step by step shown how that can work, and hopefully, the listeners can take that away from them and implement that into the practice. Because, like I said, it's a culture and takes time to build that culture, and a lot of training and a lot of structure. But it sounds absolutely amazing. And yes, we do. I've worked in hospitals before, and you have that multidisciplinary case conference. It's so good, and then you go into private practice and you don't do it. So you're like, why don't we do this? So
yeah.
how often do you case conference, by the way?
Regularly. So,
Yeah.
and the thing is it's popped into the diary. It's not
Yeah.
ad hoc. It's not, oh, if we get time, we'll have a
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah.
It's set times throughout the week. And we have EP with EP doing a case conference, and then we have multidisciplinary case conference as well.
Yeah.
And then we have the one-on-one mentoring. The other thing that we do, which is really, really cool, is that mentors in our organization, let's say you're in your grad physio coming into our practice, you'll actually have a physio mentor, but you'll have an EP mentor as well.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's exciting, right? It's cool.
Yeah.
So you get the best of both disciplines from the outset, and it really fits really well with putting the client at the center of the care, where you don't have this turf war between disciplines. It
Mm.
exists in so many places, but it doesn't exist here. We sit in this beautiful bliss of multidisciplinary care. And I think it's really wonderful. And I think it sets the tone for the experience and the level of expectations that we have for all of our clinicians coming in, when they're actually set up with two mentors from the outset, from two different disciplines as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a big win for the team members coming on board, and then ultimately a big win for the patient, because they get the best possible care. So, and upskilling in different areas they wouldn't quite know about it if they didn't have a mentor. So that sounds absolutely amazing. Excellent. So one of the last questions I've got here, which I ask all our guests on the podcast, is,
Mm.
in your eyes, what makes, we'll say for your region, we'll say, what makes the best exercise physiologist in Melbourne? So if someone was to be defined the best exercise physiologist in Melbourne, what does that look like for you? So it's a version of success is completely up to you, but what does it look like to you?
Wow. I look at, I suppose, two different things that I would look for in somebody, that I would define as, the best. Their human skills, first and foremost, their level of empathy, their level of care, their ability to see outside of the square, and that are really resourceful in finding solutions to problems, and being able to communicate really well with the client, with referrers, and with the team. So someone that has these beautiful, outstanding human skills, and somebody clinically that is really established and comprehensive in their approach, and has really great subject matter expertise, but is always willing to share and learn. Put those two things together and whew, that's
Sounds
gold.
amazing.
That's magic.
That's
That's what we aim
amazing.
to do. I'm going to put a little plug in there. That's what we aim to do here. And that's what we do.
Excellent.
With our clinicians.
It's so good to hear that because we've got new grads that are coming out of uni and they don't know what success is. They don't know what being the best is in private practice, or being the best in their field. So it's so great to hear different people with experience, their version of it. And that is a great definition of it. I couldn't agree more that if someone's got that skill set, then it puts them in good stead to have an absolutely amazing career and help hundreds of thousands of people. So excellent. That's about all we've got time for, but it's been absolutely amazing chatting with you. Where can listeners find more about you if they want to follow you or ask you a question or anything like that? What's the best way to get in contact with yourself?
Lovely. Well, the first thing that they can look to do is they can jump on either of our websites to get a better understanding of our whole range of services, I suppose, but also more of a background on me as well. So they can jump on exerciserehab.com.au. But to connect with me, I'm really happy for people to shoot me an email. So it's nicole@exerciserehab.com.au. You can certainly follow me on socials. I'm on Instagram. It's Nicole_French_EP. Or certainly have a look for me on LinkedIn. There's a lot of stuff that I do share on LinkedIn. And there's always, if we're looking at recruitment as well, LinkedIn is actually, and here's a little tip, LinkedIn is one of the first places that I start to post for recruiting opportunities as well. So before we look to post anywhere, we don't really post on Seek and that sort of stuff anymore. We have a lot of people come to us quite regularly looking for opportunities. But what I do like to do is, as a bit of a thank you for people that really do follow our work, I like to pop something up on LinkedIn for my LinkedIn followers to let them know that there may be an opportunity coming up. So connect with me on LinkedIn.
Great little insider tip for the listeners. Thank you very much. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. I know I got a lot out of that episode, and it's been absolutely amazing hearing your story, and it's been very inspirational as well. And congratulations once again on creating an amazing business. You should be very proud of yourself.
Oh, thank you very much. It's always wonderful to share this sort of stuff. And I really appreciate what you're doing in this space as well. If I can, some really great mutual respect for you there, my friend, in really helping to support and grow the EP industry. We have such a bright future ahead of us, and the more and more that we continue as a group to come together and to support each other, the more success everybody will have in the future. So thanks for having me.
No worries at all. I couldn't agree more. And very exciting times for exercise physiologists in Australia. All right, that's all we've got time for, but see you on the next episode. Bye for now.